So I'm just gonna come out and say it. I think the Pixel 7 Pro is my favorite phone of 2022, and for good reasons too. I know in my last video I talked a lot about refinement and how the iPhone 14 Pro Max is what the 13 Pro Max should have been with the addition of the dynamic island. The same can be said about Samsung with the S22 Ultra and the S21, with the S22 Ultra being what the S21 Ultra should have been with the addition of the S Pen. And I think it also applies to the Pixel with the Pixel 6 Pro to the Pixel 7 Pro. But with Google, I think they had a little bit more to prove here, especially considering the fact that with the Pixel 6 Pro, it was good in its beginning half of its life cycle, but then towards the end, it kind of started to run into a few issues. But with the Pixel 7 Pro, they definitely proved that they can improve upon all of those shortcomings and create a pretty awesome device actually. I've been using it for a while and I'm almost convinced that this might be the Android phone to buy, especially considering the fact that it's priced at a much more reasonable price than its competitors. I don't want to spend too much of an introduction on the Pixel 7 Pro because we're going to get all into it in this video. So if you like this video or any other content on this channel, make sure to like and subscribe. And with all that out of the way, let's get into it. Looking at the phone from the outside, it doesn't seem all too dissimilar from its predecessor. The only difference comes from the fact that it now has a chromed out camera bar on the back, and it changes depending on which color you choose to get the 7 Pro in, whether that's hazel, black, or white, which is obsidian and snow respectively. Unfortunately, that back camera bar does scratch quite easily, so you have to be careful when you're handling it. Although I have a case on mine, so I really don't run into that issue, but if you do not have a case or you don't like using a case with your devices, make sure to be careful not to go tossing your Pixel 7 Pro on any hard surfaces that might enable it to be scratched. Looking at the front of the phone, you have a 6.7-inch AMOLED display that actually looks very crisp and clear. And this time you actually don't have to worry about the brightness being too low when you're under direct sunlight, and you don't have to worry about you having to tilt it at various angles just to get a good look. Around the edges of the phone, you still have your usual suspects, the volume rocker on the right side, along with the power and hold button. Along the bottom, you have your speaker grill along with the USB-C port. And then on the left side of the phone, you have your, what is now extinct on the iPhone, the SIM card tray. The one thing I appreciate in Google's design is the amazing haptics that come with the Pixel 7 Pro. I was a little disappointed in the Galaxy S22 Ultra because the haptic feedback on the S22 actually felt a tad bit weaker than what you felt on the S21 Ultra. Google didn't take that approach this time around, and instead, the haptics actually feel slightly better. The Pixel 7 and the 7 Pro are actually priced reasonably well, and they have been for the past 2 years. The Pixel 6 and the 7 have been priced at $899 for the Pro model and $599 for the standard model. With phones costing well into the thousands for the more premium devices, it's a breath of fresh air from Google to actually take a more cost-effective approach when it comes to pricing it for the consumer. And speaking of price, one of the things that you are able to do to get the price reduced comes from trade-in values, which are also not very good, at least when it comes to trading in their own specific phone. When you're trading in a Pixel, you get lower than what you would get off of a Samsung or an iPhone, which I really don't understand why that exists. I think that they should be able to price their phones respectively while at the same time keeping the loyal customer from having to spend so much money when they're trying to move from one model to the next. I think now it's an important aspect to think about when you pick up your next device. How much am I going to get back when I invest this much money into this initial phone? So apart from Google's trade-in values on the Pixel 7 Pro and the design of the phone, let's go into one of the other most important aspects of the Pixel 7 Pro, and that is the camera. The cameras on the Pixel 7 Pro are great, and to be honest, I really don't think anybody would have a problem getting their perfect shot out of it. During the daytime, you can get some pretty detailed shots, as well as during the night as well with night sight, and this is where Google's AI tends to shine the most. In a lot of cases, you can get the same amount of detail in a night shot as you would in broad daylight. Not to mention, even when you're using the 2x or the 5x, or even going further than that and using the digital zoom, you can get some pretty detailed shots. You all can be able to judge for yourselves how they look to you, because sometimes photos can be subjective, and a lot of the times some people may think one photo looks better while another person might say that same photo does not look good at all. The one thing I was disappointed in on the Pixel 7 Pro when it comes to the cameras is the video quality. I actually thought that the video quality would be a lot better than the Pixel 6 Pro, and it turns out that it wasn't. It almost reminds me of the exact same. Don't get me wrong though, videos on the Pixel 7 Pro are still great. They're clear, they're crisp, and you shouldn't have any problems taking any videos in the daylight. It's mainly around artificial lighting where you may have some sort of a problem. I don't think it matches quite the quality of the iPhone, but it is good nonetheless. One of the features I wanted to test on the camera as far as editing is concerned comes from the use of the Magic Eraser. And with the Magic Eraser, it is supposed to remove unwanted objects from your photo. I did it with two separate photos. One photo had a couple cars in it, and I wanted to test and see how well it could do to replace larger objects. And it did a decent job, but if you look more down at the bottom, you can kind of see that the car looks like it's kind of fading away into existence. It got rid of a few of them, but some of them still remained. On the second picture, I wanted to see how well it did to remove individuals or people from the photo, and it actually did a much better job than the first one. On this one, it still retained a lot of its quality. You can kind of see a little bit below on the bottom that there are some things that are missing or some detail that's kind of smudged in there, but if you look from afar, you probably wouldn't even notice. For the Magic Eraser, I tend to think that it's mostly dependent on what is actually in the way of your picture. If there are large objects, it might be a lot more difficult. But if there are more smaller objects in the picture that the AI can kind of differentiate between it and the background, I think it does a much better job. The fingerprint reader has come a long way since the Pixel 6 Pro. Surprisingly enough, it's actually pretty good and accurate. It's maybe not as fast as what you would expect on Samsung's S22 Ultra with the ultrasonic sensor, but it does get the job done, and I'm pretty sure anybody would be hard pressed to tell the difference. It unlocks as fast as you would expect with a little bit of a slight delay, but not enough to actually hamper the experience of using the phone or unlocking the device every now and then. Face unlock though is a slightly different story. It doesn't really seem to work all that well. We all know that everybody wanted Face Unlock since the Pixel 6 Pro, and with the 7 Pro they took the initiative to add it, even though they knew that it wasn't going to be as accurate or it wasn't going to be as secure as generally something like the 3D Face Unlock of the Pixel 4 XL of old, or even Apple's Face ID. It doesn't really work much at all in dark areas. In broad daylight, you can pretty much unlock your phone probably 90% of the time, even though it'll miss that too. But in general, at night, it doesn't work. Probably maybe 20% of the time it'll actually work to unlock your phone. Overall though, it is just an option, and you can use it if you want, and if you don't, you can just leave it alone. Most of the time you'll probably be unlocking your phone with your fingerprint reader anyway, so it's not like it really matters. The Pixel launcher, in my experience, and probably everyone else's, is as basic as an Android skin as you can get. It has the Material You theming where you can change the colors of Google's most specific apps and even its menus, as well as giving it themed icons so that way it can match those colors as well. On the home screen, you get your usual at a glance widget and the search bar on the bottom. Unfortunately, you can't remove either one, and that is a problem for some people I know, because some people want some extra screen real estate that's attached to the home screen to add different widgets and maybe just more icons in general, or just being able to design it any way they want. Although Google has been adding a little bit more function to the at-a-glance widget, so it doesn't feel like it's just taking up space on your screen. Things like maybe a flight that may be coming up, or some type of event that's attached to your calendar, even timers, the weather, and a bunch of other stuff. I generally do like the at-a-glance widget, and it is helpful most of the time. There's a little bit of a redundancy with the widgets because sometimes it'll have some information that's already shown through at-a-glance, so I guess it can be useless in some ways, depending on if you want your home screen to be a little bit more stylized. But other than that, I think it serves a good purpose, but I understand those frustrations if you just want to be able to get rid of it. What really draws people into the Pixel line or with Google in general is their AI features, and a lot of them are really good to use. Things like the call screen feature, where you can use it to pretty much just allow spam calls to hang up on you. It just makes it a little bit more fun to do rather than just pressing the reject button. The ability to see wait times on call service centers are also very useful, on top of the ability to see transcriptions of automated voice machines and having the numbers available to you without having to actually type or press the keypad button so it brings up the keypad. And it allows you to see the options in text form rather than just listening to it over your phone, so that way you don't have to hear it or repeat it again if you missed it. There are also things like being able to transcribe text from your speech, and this is one of the things that I use the most, mainly for messages, because it works incredibly fast and incredibly accurate. You may think that you might not use this feature all that often, but I ended up using it a lot more than I thought I would. You can operate the entire Google Pixel without even touching it for the most part. That includes calling, that includes messaging, that includes opening apps, and everything else in between. I also like the function of just being able to answer the phone by just saying answer, and the phone will automatically know that I'm using my voice, obviously, so then it will add on speaker, so that way the person on the other end can hear me. A lot of these features that I mentioned earlier existed on the Pixel 6 Pro. The only difference is that with the 7 Pro, they've only gotten better. And that is because it moved on from the first generation to the second generation tensor, which leads me to performance. As far as performance is concerned, with the Pixel 7 Pro, I wanted to first start with sound quality. And in terms of sound quality, the internal speakers provide a decent sound. They are slightly worse from what I can hear from the Pixel 6 Pro, but that's not necessarily a bad thing for most people, because most people are going to be using headphones rather than the external speaker in general. For media, when it comes to using it for speaker phone calls or sound quality when it comes to making a phone call or a video call, it actually doesn't sound bad at all. It sounds like what you would expect out of your general speakerphone. It's hard to listen to or show you an example of, so you kind of just have to take my word for it. This does seem like maybe the speakers or the internal speakers are one of the areas that Google decided to make cost-effective measures to try to get to that $899 or $599 price range. Possibly. Now, in terms of the processor, that's a bit of a different story. Now, the processor on the Pixel 7 Pro and the Pixel 7 aren't the best. They're technically based off of old Samsung Exynos processors, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it runs slow by any means. Google tempered the tensor to be more focused on AI processing speeds rather than just straight raw power, and it works out for them. There's just something about everything on the Pixel that runs and flows that I actually don't see any noticeable lag or stutters when I'm doing anything, whether that's moving about different web pages, whether that's moving from one app to the next. Everything just generally flows as smooth as you would expect out of a top-notch premium device. Now with the Pixel 7 Pro, you don't have the fastest processor out of a smartphone, but it does do reasonably well when running graphic intensive apps like Genshin Impact, for instance, which can hover around the mid 40s to the mid 50s in terms of frame rate. When running something like Xbox Game Pass, which is generally going to rely on the Pixel 7's wireless modem to run its titles, you can get minimal delay with no stuttering whatsoever. I will note that when I did power on my phone for the first time, I did run into some Wi-Fi connection issues, but after a quick reset of the phone and started right over again, I didn't run into that issue again. Overall, the performance of the Pixel 7 Pro is great, and I haven't had a problem with it, and sometimes I actually feel like it runs faster than my S22 Ultra or smoother, with a lot less stutters and a lot less delays when I'm pushing an app. Battery life is probably one of the things that I was interested in the most, because I wanted to see how well the Pixel 7 fared apart from the Pixel 6. And that's mostly because with Android devices, we have yet to see a phone that does exceptionally well. A lot of times with Android devices, we get average battery life. And with the Pixel 6 Pro, it was generally just average. With the Pixel 7 Pro, I was expecting it to be a lot better. Unfortunately, that's not what we got. And what happened was it ended up being marginally better. A little bit better than average. Not bad, but not extraordinary either. With the always on display off, I ended up with 7 hours and 13 minutes. With the always on display on, I ended up with 7 hours and 4 minutes. So I noticed that the always on display really doesn't make too much of a difference in battery. Now this is with the brightness at 50% and the refresh rate still at 120 Hz. So it actually isn't bad, it's just average. Better than the Pixel 6 Pro, which I was getting around 6 to 5 hours, but not much better in general. By the end of both days, I was left with about 10 to 15%. And I was disappointed, not necessarily in the total battery life, but in the fact that it wasn't that much of an upgrade from the Pixel 6 to the Pixel 7. I did have a thought about dropping the refresh rate down to 60 Hz and seeing what happens, just to see how much of a difference it actually make. After I dropped the refresh rate from 120 Hz to 60 Hz, essentially what I ended up with was 9 hours and 20 minutes when I had the always on display off. And when I had the always on display on with the 60 Hz, what I ended up with was 9 hours and 4 minutes. What I found between the two differences in battery life happened to be one, that the always on display, at least in terms of Android, is negligent to the battery life in general. It maybe is a difference between maybe 10 or so minutes. But the main difference that Android is having a problem with is, or the Pixel 7 is having a problem with, is in the refresh rate. Dropping it from 120 to 60 got me almost 2 hours more of battery life. Now, none of these tests that I made are super scientific or anything, but it's just a couple of observations that I noticed when I turned one of the features on and one of the features off. There is something to say though about the battery life having 2 extra hours attached when I turned off the adaptive refresh rate. So I'm just going to reiterate this again. I think the Pixel 7 Pro is my favorite phone of 2022. And you might be asking yourself, well, why do you think that the Pixel 7 Pro is your favorite phone if you mention all these things you don't like about it? Well, it's mostly because I think that the Pixel 7 Pro does everything I need or want out of a phone well enough. And it also does it while also costing at a reasonable price. It's in the similar vein to the way I described the Galaxy Tab S8 Plus. And the way I described it is that, can it do the things I need it to do well enough or even exceptional in a few different categories? And the answer is yes. Does it have the best battery? No, but it is average. It does it well enough. Does the Pixel 7 Pro have a top-notch display or the best display on the market? No, but it does have a really good display that can get the job done in most situations, and I can see it in direct sunlight. Does the Pixel 7 Pro have the fastest processor? No, it doesn't have the fastest processor, but it does run well enough to where I don't really notice any noticeable difference between the next phone next to it. These answers to these questions that I had to the Tab S8 Plus is the same questions I pushed to the Pixel 7 Pro. And that's what led me to the same conclusion I had with the Galaxy Tab S8 Plus, and it being my favorite tablet of this past year. Now, am I saying that a lot of those shortcomings that are attached to the Pixel 7 Pro, are they acceptable and should they continue? No, the Pixel 7 Pro definitely should have better battery life than it does currently. But is that a big issue for me at this current moment? No. It's not. I enjoy using the Pixel 7 Pro and all of its features that Google attaches to it. I mentioned in my Pixel Buds Pro review that if they can keep up the quality that they had and the care that they took into making the Pixel Buds Pro to the Pixel 7, they would have a winner on their hands. And they definitely did just that. So apart from all that, what did you guys think? Do you guys think the Pixel 7 Pro is a good phone? Do you think it's a bad phone? Do you still own it right now currently? Did you return it for something else? Mention it all in the comments below. And if you like this video or any other content on my channel, make sure to like and subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. And with all that being said, I'll see you guys in the next video.